We're living in a golden age of comic book adaptations. It seems like every month there's something new to which fans can look forward, like Daredevil, Marvel's hit Netflix show, which this season is adding several iconic characters, like Elektra and the Punisher. But as you might remember, this is not the first time Daredevil has been adapted for film. Way back in 2003, way before he was Batman, Ben Affleck donned the horned red mask in Mark Steven Johnson's Daredevil movie. That was in the early days of the comic book movie boom, way before Marvel had their own studio. At the time, it was exciting to see a superhero movie that wasn't about a household name like Spider-Man or Batman. But looking back, it's a little rough compared to what we have now. So let's take a closer look and count down 11 ways in which the Daredevil series is different from the Daredevil movie. Number 1. The show takes its time. It took 13 episodes for Daredevil to put on his classic costume and actually use the name Daredevil. It waited until the second season to introduce Elektra, maybe the most iconic of Daredevil's entire supporting cast. The show is clearly playing the long game here, laying the groundwork for big developments to come. The movie took the opposite approach, jumping right into the famous Elektra saga, probably the most famous Daredevil story ever, while also having to introduce the main character and show his origin via flashbacks. There is a lot crammed into that movie. I realize the makers knew they might only have one shot and wanted to jump right to the good stuff, but the show is proving that this material works way better when it takes its time and builds to the big moments. Number 2. In the show, Daredevil does not kill. As anyone who's watched the show can tell you, it gets pretty violent. Daredevil himself really messes some guys up, but it's also pretty clear about his self-imposed no-killing rule. Just take a look at the trailer for Season 2, which directly addresses this, with the Punisher saying the difference between them is that when he hits people, they stay down. But in the 2003 movie, they did stay down. Remember that scene where Daredevil throws a guy in front of a subway train? For a character as consumed by Catholic guilt as Matt Murdock, it seems a bit weird for him to be running around murdering people all the time. Number 3. It commits to a tone. The Daredevil movie is, well, let's call it inconsistent. It swings from a super serious mix of violence and religion to a wacky kung fu fight in a playground with a guy who's supposed to be blind to Colin Farrell's crazy over-the-top performance as Bullseye. The tone is all over the place, and it makes for a jarring viewing experience. The show, like pretty much every Marvel Studios production, picks a tone and sticks to it. There's occasionally some humor and lightness, usually thanks to Foggy Nelson, but mostly this is a pretty serious show. It strives to keep things dark and grounded, and carefully introduces crazier elements, like Daredevil's powers or mystical ninjas, in a way that doesn't seem out of place. Number 4. The Punisher. As we all know by now, one of the focal points of Daredevil Season 2 is the introduction of the Punisher, played by Jon Bernthal. Now, it's not the movie's fault for not including him, since at the time the rights to the characters were owned by different companies, but one of the exciting things about seeing this adapted for a long-form format like TV is the way the universe can build, adding new characters as it goes, basically like the comics have for decades. Plus, the Punisher rules, and as a fan of the character, I can't wait to see him interact with the MCU. Number 5. Daredevil's powers. This is a rare one, something the movie actually does a bit better than the show. If you don't know anything about Daredevil, you could easily watch far into the show without really knowing what his superpowers are. For a long time, it seems like he just hears really well. The movie, for all its faults, does a pretty good job visualizing his enhanced senses through a flashback scene where they kick in for the first time when he's a kid, and also his radar sense, which actually shows us how he experiences the world. Number 6. Who killed Matt Murdock's father? The Daredevil movie makes the exact same stupid change to the comics as the original Tim Burton Batman movie. They decided to make the main villain, in this case the Kingpin, the guy who killed the hero's father when he was a kid. Isn't it enough to just have a hero trying to stop a villain? Adding a revenge aspect doesn't make it a better or more compelling story, and this is something the Netflix series smartly avoided. Number 7. How does Daredevil fight so well? The show introduces a key character from the comics who is left out of the movie. Stick, the old blind martial arts master who trained Matt Murdock to use his enhanced senses and how to fight. Aside from Stick just being a cool character, this helps the audience's suspension of disbelief, because seriously, how does a blind guy suddenly get so good at kung fu? In the movie, Matt Murdock just suddenly becomes an amazing fighter and acrobat, and it's both ridiculous and really dumb. Number 8. Fan service. Let there be no doubt that Mark Steven Johnson, director of the Daredevil movie, is a fan of the comics. He crams fan service into seemingly every scene. Every minor character is named after a writer or artist who worked on Daredevil. There's even a big cameo by Kevin Smith, who had written a famous run on the comic in the late 90s. For comic fans, this quickly goes from novel to distracting. The series is less concerned with proving its comic geek street cred. There are some subtle background Easter eggs and some pretty obscure nods to the comics, but mostly these references feel like world building instead of a plea for approval from the fans. Number 9. The action. The Netflix series has received tons of praise for its action sequences, which are grounded, physical, and often intensely violent. The fights rely on practical effects with great choreography and stunt work. This is a big change from the 2003 movie, which was made during that post-Matrix period of action movies, so it's full of CGI doubles and physically impossible acrobatics and bullet time and stuff like that. Looking at the action scenes now, they have not aged well, and the obvious shifts to CGI people clash badly with the serious tone much of the movie is trying to take. Number 10. The show doesn't have that terrible soundtrack. It's a non-stop stream of nu metal acts like Drowning Pool and Saliva, with a big montage sequence set to Evanescence's Bring Me to Life, the lead single from the soundtrack. I know music taste is totally subjective, but I'm the one making the video here. The soundtrack sucks, and the show is automatically better because it doesn't have it. And finally, number 11. Coolio. Of all the things the Netflix series has that the movie doesn't, there's one it probably won't be able to match. 90s rapper Coolio. One of the strangest parts of going back and watching the movie is when you suddenly realize, wait a second, Coolio's in this. He plays a wrongfully accused man who is defended by Nelson and Murdoch, and honestly, it's not a particularly memorable role. But at the end of the day, the makers of the movie can be proud that they had more Grammy-winning 90s hip-hop icons in their Daredevil adaptation. Thank you so much for watching our video about the differences between the Daredevil movie and Netflix show. With Season 2 coming soon and adding Elektra to the mix, we're sure this list is about to get a lot longer. Let us know what you think in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to Cinematica, where we help you watch smarter.